Hello and welcome to another revision video for you to use in your paper 3 revision. We're going to have a look at 4 important Nazi leaders in detail: Josef Goebbels, Heinrich Himmler, Hermann Goering and Ernst Röhm, and then we'll also have a look at 6 other influential Nazis. So let's start off with Josef Goebbels. The big point is that he was a Nazi minister of propaganda. And Goebbels was particularly important in the election campaigns of the 1930s. He masterminded tactics and strategy and presentation of the Nazi message that went down so well with the Nazi voters. After 1933, he was Minister of Propaganda, which gave him control of newspapers, which were a vital form of media, and also the radio, which was an emerging form of media. This role also gave him control over the arts, such as film and art. Other aspects which are relevant to Goebbels was that after previously being critical to Hitler in the earliest years of the Nazi Party, he became very loyal to Hitler after the Bamberg Conference of 1926. He offered Hitler the support of the northern Nazis. After the Bamberg Conference, he was the Gauleiter, the regional organizer for Berlin. And throughout the Nazi state in the 1930s, he was instrumental in developing the anti-Semitic policies. For example, he was a keen supporter of Kristallnacht. So here's when you might write about Goebbels in your examinations. You might include him if you're writing about reasons why Hitler became Chancellor in 1933 in his work in the election campaigns. If you're writing about features of life in Nazi Germany, and in particular if you're writing about the relative lack of opposition, the way that propaganda maintained support for the Nazis throughout the 1930s. Okay, so let's turn next to Heinrich Himmler. Our big point here is that he was the commander of the SS. So, as commander of the SS, Himmler was instrumental in organising the Night of the Long Knives in 1934, which removed the internal opponents of Hitler in the Nazi Party. And then as the 1930s progressed, the role of the SS developed under Himmler's leadership. He was a key figure in the development of the police state. In particular, the Gestapo, the secret police, were organised by Himmler. But the SS also played an increasing role. For example, it was Himmler who set up the first concentration camp at Dachau, and over the regular police too. All eventually came under the control of the SS. Other aspects to note for Himmler is that he was also incredibly loyal to Hitler. His key qualities were that as an organizer and an administrator, and he was a key driver in the Nazis' anti-Christian policies. So here's when you might write about him. For example, if you're writing about the elimination of opposition with the Night of the Long Knives, key features of the Nazi police state, and also possibly you could drop him in if you're writing about the Nazi religious policies, their opposition to the Christian churches. Okay, so let's have a look at Hermann Goering. Now, our big points with Goering is that he's important in Prussia, particularly as interior minister. But he also has a role later in the 1930s in the Nazis' economic policies. But as Minister of the Interior for Prussia, this gave him control over the police, and this was important in the events of the Reichstag fire. But later in the decade, Hitler gave Goering responsibility for the 4-year economic plan in 1936. Now this was to prepare Germany for war. And in this role, Goering took direct command of aspects of economic planning, and he overrode the existing Minister of Economics, Hjalmar Schacht. Other aspects of interest for Goering is that his background was as a pilot in the First World War. He was a high-profile military figure, as were several other leading Nazis. And what he offered the Nazi Party were contacts with the establishment, and this was important when Hitler tried to make the party increasingly legitimate throughout the 1930s. So Goering had connections in society. For example, he was married to a countess. Goring's importance did decline after our period in the Second World War. So here's when you might write about Hermann Goering. You might write about him in questions about reasons why Hitler became Chancellor in 1933, particularly his handling of the Reichstag fire, and also if you write about Nazi economic policies. Okay, finally, with our four that we'll look at in depth, here's Ernst Röhm. Our big point for Ernst Röhm is that he was the leader of the SA. Now remember, the SA were the Nazi paramilitary, also known as the Brown Shirts. And as the leader of the SA, Ernst Röhm pushed for a socialist revolution led by the SA. Now this was at odds with Hitler's direction after 1933, when he wanted to come to terms with the establishment. So having previously been a close ally of Hitler's, Ernst Röhm became a potential rival. And in 1934, along with other SA leaders, Ernst Röhm was executed in the Night of the Long Knives. So other aspects for Ernst Röhm of interest to us can be his background. So Röhm was working class and a brutal ex-soldier. He'd become a political liability and out of step with Hitler's thinking. Whereas Hitler wanted to go in a nationalist direction, Ernst Röhm wanted to follow a socialist direction, and there's a key tension here in Nazi ideology. For most of his time in the Nazi Party, Ernst Röhm was a close ally of Hitler's, but he was not sycophantic in the way of Goebbels or Himmler. For example, Röhm did not use the term Führer when addressing Hitler. Instead, he just called him Addy. And such was Röhm's popularity with working class members of the SA that he was a potential alternative leader. After Röhm's death in the Night of the Long Knives, the SA became less influential and the SS, under Himmler's leadership, became more influential. So here's when you might write about Röhm. When you're talking about the elimination of internal opposition by Hitler, and possibly also when you write about the rise of Nazi popularity in the early 1930s, when the SA became a mass movement under Röhm's leadership and impressed the population with their organisation and their potential to oppose the communists. So we're going to have a look now at 6 other important Nazi leaders, and that will give us 10 in total in our video. Firstly, Reinhard Heydrich, who was in charge of the SS under Himmler's leadership. And Heydrich had responsibility for the Gestapo, that's a secret police, the SD, the Internal Security Force, and the Kripo, who were the criminal police force. Baldur von Shirach, who was in charge of all youth movements. Dr. Robert Ley, who was in charge of the German Labour Front, and that included Strength Through Joy, the KDF. Gregor Strasser, was a northern Nazi and a rival to Hitler in the late 1920s and early 1930s. He was sidelined and also executed in the Night of the Long Knives. So here's another example that you can use of Hitler establishing himself as the sole leader in the party. Roland Freisler was the Minister for Justice. So he played a role in the Nazification of the legal system. So that kind of goes hand in hand with the Nazi police state. And lastly, Bishop Muller, who was the leader of the Reich Church. So to apply this content, here's a quick retrieval quiz for you to have a go at. The questions get increasingly difficult, I think. You might want to pause the video now and have a go at this, and the answers will appear in a few seconds. So maybe pause now. Okay, so here are the answers. Thanks for watching. Good luck with your studies and your revision for your exams. Remember, there are plenty more videos and guidance for you on the CHSG History channel.